All right,
Always.
welcome back, everybody. Outer Rim Rookie here. I've got obviously Dan Veloso here, who's joining me in this little journey of building a cloud car pilot. What do we get ourselves into, Dan?
I don't know. I really don't know. It's
But
yeah.
also, I have the wonderful, you've known him if you've ever watched any of my episodes. It's the wonderful Terry Chu from Panda Props costumes. Uh,
Cost.
I'm just so excited that Terry has agreed to help us out with this costume in any sort of way because if you've ever met Terry or worked with Terry, you know how talented he is. I'm going to shine your boots here a little bit, sir. You're extremely talented. Your videos on your own YouTube channel is just is always a great way to teach others how to build, construct, whatever it is. And I know as an Outer Rim Garrison member and Falcon Base member, a number of our members always go to you for advice, opinions, and jobs too. I did with Nine None, and it's just like I'm thankful that you're helping us out with this design because this is a complicated one. Although it doesn't look it,
Yeah,
it is
that's right.
kind of complicated.
Right.
So, what do you think about this idea of a cloud car pilot? What are some of the things that you dig, and maybe some of the challenges you see us facing?
First of all, I was like, what is Rob and Dan thinking here? Like with the kind of the most obscure, but I love it, right? Because it's like that's what think about like Wilrow Hood, right? Like the most obscure, literally a second and a half of screen time, and yet
Right.
you have entire,
Mhm.
clubs or portions of clubs or activities devoted to this character. So, I anytime anyone's it might not be a thing like I'm passionate about characters that I like, and there's other people that I'm not super fond of that character, but I like this other thing. That's cool. That's what makes this world unique. Like you said, you look at it from the outset and you're like, it's a helmet, it's a jumpsuit, some boots. Like, it's really simple, right? But again, as with anything that we know in the Star Wars universe, it's you dig a little bit deeper, and you're like, okay, great. I'm trying to find references for this costume, and there's only A, B, or C, and it's not like there's some big thick Star Wars book with 4 pages devoted to this character. That's
Yeah.
not there. It's
Yeah.
very obscure. There's a puppet, basically like a maquette that was used in one shot, or a couple of shots from really far away, and that's kind of all you got, sort of in terms of what is in film canon. And then you've got other references for toys or statues or figures, that kind
Mhm.
of thing.
And as much as I enjoy looking at the little action figures, and you know this, obviously, the action figures are never reliable when it comes to designing a screen accurate
No.
costume. I think right now me and Dan are focusing on trying to stick as much as we can to the original design of the maquette,
Okay.
with a touch of the old the concept design
Mhm.
done by Neil
Right.
Rodis Drumero. Can you give us a quick description? Like we were talking off air, like Nilo is so influential in some of the in a
Sure.
lot of Star Wars world. Like, so who are some of the what are some of the designs he's had a major influence on?
Yeah, so he worked as an illustrator, concept artist, and was billed early on as a costume designer on Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And he kind of did more and more as those films, increased in or progressed in production. So, but I mean, the Hut Slayer, Princess Leia outfit, the bikini, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
The biker scouts, Endor troopers, I believe maybe Royal Guards. The list goes on and on. It's a very deep
That's a
list,
big
right? So
list, though.
Hmm.
yeah,
Oh
it's a
yeah.
very big list, and so you can go back to all those making of books or the art books, and you'll see Milo Rodas signed underneath it, and he designed a lot of those characters and a lot of those costumes. I want to say Admiral Akbar as well too.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, so and he is just, and what's really funny is like I grew up sort of learning to draw that way. One partially influenced by those books,
Hmm.
but that style of illustration was very much like product design or production illustration, right? So when I went to college, I went to Emily Carr and Cap College combined for 4 years, and there was a course like or one of the courses was for like illustration marker rendering, right? So it's like old school. And it's so
Right.
funny, I have this like right behind me, I wanted to show it, but like this is literally before I got my iPad, whatever it was, 3-4 years ago, the first drawings that I did of KR8 for
Oh,
Buckethead
that's so
No,
cool.
are
Yeah.
they're marker. It's like marker on paper,
Yeah,
right?
oh,
it's so
neat. Yeah.
reminiscent of his style.
Right. Yeah. So that's I just grew up learning how to draw like that, and so that's why I have a deep appreciation for those. And that style of drawing at that time was very much how can you capture the essence or I know we look at it like, oh, well, that just looks cool, but let's like, there is a design purpose, right?
Mhm.
So how can you capture it in as few lines as possible, as quickly as possible? And so, he might have been thinking like, oh, I'm going to design this character. It's going to be really quick. It's just going to be a sculpture. It's going to look kind of like, the base of the Rebel Fleet Trooper helmet, and
Right.
maybe add some greeblies and blah 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 blah, and there you go. And there's a few things I'm going to talk about when hopefully I can share my screen and I got some little sketches to talk about it. But it's really just capturing that essence. So he was probably thinking like, if they needed to do this as a real shot, oh, we'll use, Nilo's here working with the Plastic Boys. That was the department at ILM that was making the biker scout costumes and some of the armor pieces for different characters, Endor troopers, that kind of thing. And so he would work directly hand in hand with them. So doing the drawings, sometimes sculpting things, working with the fabricators, and then they would like vacuum form or make fiberglass armor. So he might have just approached it from, oh, if we needed to build this for real, we're going to get the costume department to get a flight suit, make a flight suit, and then we're going to make this helmet, and we can probably use this as a base. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this because this character's got 2 seconds of screen time,
Right.
and then let's go. And then maybe at some point they determined it didn't need to be a real person in the cockpit. We don't need to build that. That's really expensive. It's going to be a faraway shot. You're not going to see it. 70 millimeter film. It's optical what do you call it, optical photography, so it's like layers of film on top of one another. It's going to be so blurry that you're not going to see it, and so they could probably decided that they could get away with the maquette.
Right. And that's what we ended up having. And
Yeah,
I would love to see, like you talked about the helmet, very similar
sure,
to a Rebel Fleet officer. So you said you have some pics. Let's see what you got right here, so we can get
sure.
a mindset of.
um
I see pictures of the Fleet Trooper. Oh, those are drawings.
Oh, there
Okay.
it is. Wow.
okay,
Intense zoom.
what I was thinking was, I the drawing that's on the top there,
Mhm.
that is sort of just my sketch of what the original, it's called a World War II Navy Talker helmet. And what that
Right.
was it was this gigantic steel helmet. And the reason why it was so big is because back in the day, they would wear like the headphones and the headset under the helmet.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So it was this gigantic thing. And I don't have a picture of the actual one, but I actually own that actual steel helmet. I bought it online
Oh,
and I have a
wow.
World War II. Yeah. That's what I used as the basis for the mold for the vacuum form buck for my Rebel Fleet Trooper helmets. Okay. If
Um,
you look at the upper helmet here, okay, so
yeah.
these two,
Right.
that's kind of my sketch of the Navy Talker helmet, and in particular where I've indicated with the green, it's a fairly, I'm not going to say vertical, but it's kind of more straight.
Right. Right.
Whereas
Right.
in the concept art, sorry, I need to move this over. This guy, it's like it just like swings out slightly more, like it's
Mhm.
wider, right?
Yeah, I see
If you were
that.
to like lay these on top of one another, I feel the Cloud Car Pilot is kind of like wider at the base,
Yeah.
and then same front and back. So like this angle in particular, it's steeper than on this guy
Mhm.
on the maquette and the illustration. On the illustration, it's kind of one of those things like, sorry, I'm just trying to draw here vertically. It's like, oh, you're just like, okay, it's gonna be like that. Okay, it's like this. Okay, good. We're done. Go. Right? Like it just
Mhm.
Yeah.
you're not really like, well, is this 15 degrees or is it 12 degrees? No. We just need to make this. We got to go. Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I feel like these angles here are kind of a little bit more important for you guys, because I
Right.
know if I was approaching it like how, oh, this is awesome. Dan and Rob are going to pay me millions of dollars to make these helmets for them. It's going to be fantastic. They're going to be the best clients ever. They're, you want it to look
Sorry.
great and super accurate. You're going to want specific things of like, Terry, we liked how you modeled this out, but we think that in the photos it needs to be like a quarter of an inch more. You know what I mean? Like you are quote unquote commissioning this to be the best version of the Cloud Car Pilot helmet that can be. And so I think, whilst, and this is kind of one of my very first questions on here on my notes is,
right.
Is this based off the Talker helmet? So in one regard, if you were like, Terry, we're going to a convention next weekend, what can you do for us? I'm like, oh my God, well, I could do this, this, this. I could vacuum form. I got the original thing. I could make some ribs, in a week. Let's bang this out. But it's not gonna, I don't think you'd be happy with it, because you're gonna be like, well, the general public thinks we looks okay, but based on all the research, and we've done like freaking 3 podcasts on this now, or 3 video, like we want it to be more accurate. And I think that's where these kinds of details are going to be really important, right?
Agreed.
So I think proportion wise, I wanted to just show you this picture of Katie. I just made that for her last week. And you can see the base of, so sorry, I'm going to draw on top here because that's what I didn't do. More football plays over on the back end here. You can see this base is the Talker helmet mold, right? Now, it looks great, but if you were to look at, like, I know, again, just basing off the reference photos, it is, your guys' helmet is more tapered. Like this, I agree. Yeah. Right. Just a bit. So it's close, but it's not quite. And that's why I think it's important to get it right. So that's kind of one of my questions for you guys is, I know, we like it. We want to base it off the maquette. We want to base it off the concept art. I think I watched one of your previous YouTube videos about it. And I think you guys were sort of saying like, oh, like, let's just pretend that they were making, Andor, or they were making Rogue One. And for a brief moment, we went to visit Cloud City. How would those costume designers revisit this character, right? Okay. Yeah. Because, we've seen that. We've seen Rebel Fleet Troopers in The Mandalorian. We've seen, characters that we've seen before, kind of, even the X-Wing pilots. It's like, yeah, absolutely, they look like X-Wing pilots, but that they've done things, and I can see they've done things to kind of upgrade them just a little bit so that the camera, like, likes them, right? It plays well for detail. So that's kind of one of my first things is, like, when I thought about that, I'm like, no, I don't think it's based off the Talker helmet at all. That sort of then leads me to, what do we do about these options, right? Do we do something that's vacuum formed? Do we do something that's 3D printed? Do we do something that's molded? But before I actually even get there, I want to talk about this. We've talked about the shape very briefly. One of the most important things is this red area that I've indicated down here. Right. So that's going to be what I call the return edge of the helmet, right? So when you look at the helmet, from the underside, there's sort of this like semi-implied, there's kind of this like implied thickness to this area, right? Yeah. And I wanted to talk to you guys about how important that is. Like, for one, I think it's important, but if it's that important for you, then almost immediately this option is kind of out of the running, because you can't vacuum form something with a deep undercut like that, right? Okay. Unless it was made in pieces and we glue it together and all that jazz. So that sort of negates that option. Of course, something can be 3D printed, right? So, this could be modeled, it could be 3D printed. We print 2 of them, we put them together, great. The third option, again, which would take into account this, the 3D print and the molded, which could accommodate this thickness, is where if we made a 3D print, but then we basically made a mold, and then we cast a version of this helmet, right? Now, the great part about that is you spend a lot of time, you invest it, and you make the one helmet, and then you have a mold, and now you can make more, right? But do you want to make more? Is that important? For some people, that's not important. And then there's also the cost. Making a mold, you're talking about, $150 in silicone, $150 in a mother mold, $150 in resin. Like, you're $500-600 in on just mold materials before we've even made one, right?
Hmm.
And that's a
Right.
fairly significant investment. So, which sort of made me think like, okay, it's going to be this option, which is a 3D printed helmet,
Hmm.
which could take into account that return edge, right?
Hmm.
Um,
How
so,
Okay, so when you
sorry,
say return edge, are we talking about there's a certain thickness to it? Because
it,
when
it
I'm
it
looking
could
at
be
the
faked.
maquettes,
It could be
Hmm.
faked, right? So if I'm looking at, if I'm just doing a drawing here again, I'm doing vertically, it's very hard. Um, let's just pretend that's the helmet. Like, if it was to go in like up to appear like there was a 1 inch thickness there, that's
yeah, I
fake,
see what you're saying.
right? That's faked
Yeah.
so that when you look at it from the distance, you're like, oh, there's a thickness there, but really it's not 1 inch thick all the way around because
Hmm.
that would make for a super thick ass helmet, right? So there's ways around that. We could figure that out in the way that we engineer and how we design the model. But yeah, I mean that kind of steers us in a specific direction almost right off the bat. um, the other thing I want to talk about is I noticed in some pictures, and they might be more so in that there was someone that made like a statue or something. I'm not sure who made that one, but it almost
Yeah.
looked like the way that they interpreted it was that the foam kind of was the thickness. Like it did appear like the whole thing was thicker.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you right now, that's very, very thick. So on the Rebel Fleet Trooper helmet, um, I basically need to put like an inch and a half of foam. Um, Sorry, maybe not an inch. It's about an inch, inch and a quarter of foam in here to take up the space. If I was to put a 1 inch
Mm.
return on there, that's going to look massively thick. Like just
I
if you
I
if
don't
you
think
take
it's
like
that
a
thick. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's like half inch, 5/8 kind of thing, right? So that's again why I think we would fake it
I'm
in the
thinking,
model.
I don't know about you, Dan. Don't you think
Hmm.
it's as thin as the Rebel Fleet Trooper helmet?
Well, I don't know. I've got the gunner helmet. It's pretty much the same thing as the fleet trooper helmet.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know.
Because I look
I
at the maquette you talked about, like that statue bust.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks thick. But when I look at the actual maquette itself, it's thin. Like it's quite thin.
Huh.
If you were to make it like the actual Rebel Fleet Trooper helmet, keep in mind that helmet was vacuum formed, so it's like 16th of an inch thick. You know what I mean, right? It's
Yeah, I know
very
what you're
thin
saying.
plastic. So I don't think you'd want that because it doesn't have that substantiality there.
Yeah,
Um, the benefit of the Rebel Fleet Trooper helmet is that it actually has multiple layers. So you've got the base helmet, you've got what's called the swoop,
right,
you've
right.
got the blast shield, and you've got the black like visor thing that goes up.
Hmm.
So once all of those are glued and screwed or riveted
That
together,
makes sense.
it
Yeah,
makes it more
Hmm.
rigid.
right.
If you were just to wear the vacuum form of the tanker helmet itself, even if I pulled it in a thicker material, you're going to be like, meh, it's kind of, Terry, it's kind of meh, right? Like it just
Gotcha.
doesn't
Yeah.
have the
That makes sense.
substantiality.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I'm thinking that it would be I personally think it would be a helmet that's done in three pieces. So there'd be like what I call the Mohawk ribs here,
Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
left side and right side.
Yeah.
They would be glued together. I would probably put registration keys and holes so that there's like little rods in between. So when it's glued together, it's like rock solid. It's not going to come apart.
Gotcha.
And then the ear headphone thing, greeblies, would be separate. And they
Right.
would be, I think the base of those would potentially be printed, or I would actually have those as hollowed out, like
Hmm.
indented areas.
Hmm.
And then we would separately print like sort of these disc greeblies that you would glue in.
Hmm.
Right. Right. I
That's
know
the
what
way
you're
I
saying.
would do it. And then the other note, I'm not going to switch back the drawing because we're just talking about it right this second. But the other note that I had was, yeah, whether or not, yeah, do you want to use foam? Do you want to use a hard hat harness? There's different ways you can go. Keep in mind that, foam is always going to look more stable. I was going to ask, there's no strap on this, right? Is there?
No, there is
Doesn't
no
look like it.
strap, but
No.
Yeah.
you wear a balaclava with
So
obviously the goggles and
Yeah.
these little greeblies on the
So
side.
that is definitely something to consider because when you have fabric, and I don't care what kind it is, and I've done
Mm.
this with enough costumes now that I sort of know, right? Is like when you have fabric, check out my sideburns, and then you try to put a helmet thing on top, this is always going to slide, okay?
Okay.
Because
Hmm.
this fabric is going to slide on your hair right? No matter how tight it is. Okay.
Right.
And I mean, it's part of it is to provide movement, and it's supposed to be moisture wicking. It's supposed to grab the sweat and prevent it from getting all, if you're playing a sport or if you're, trooping, whatever, it's supposed to capture your sweat, and no one cares if it moves. When you have something like that, where the weight of something fairly large is on it, it's for sure going to start to slide, right? So like,
Right.
I would be tempted to do it more just as like what I did for Katie's Rebel, because I was asking her, I was like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to do foam? Do you want to do a adjustable harness? She's like, well, Kevin might wear it. And I said, I'm going to do it as foam. And if you decide to, both of you going to wear it, you can deal with that later. But they also have the benefit of a strap. The Rebel Fleet Trooper has a strap, right? So what I would suggest is doing it as foam. And the easiest foam that I always do is like, I'll do like a mohawk strip, I'll do a brow piece and then a side piece. Right. And then because you're both making yours kind of custom to your heads, you can adjust it. Start with a 1-inch foam and put it in, and then put it on with your balaclava and go, well, I would have liked it a little more snug. Well, then just go get some like 1/8 foam and glue that as a second layer inside, and then it'll be rock solid. And as you wear it, it's going to basically, the foam will start to pack down and it'll shape to your head a bit, and it'll be more comfortable and it'll be fairly snug, right? So
will it be
keep in
hidden?
Mind, it'll be hidden because the helmet is quite deep.
Yeah.
Right. So like if I was just to eyeball it on me here, it sits fairly deep. It's not up high. It's fairly deep. And like I said, there's a lot of space. Like on me, I've got a small head. I would get away with like 1.5 inches of foam. Like, Katie's taller and bigger, right? So like I just put like 1 inch there, but like there's quite a bit of space. So like if I'm just guesstimating 1.5 inches is like that much around on me, that's quite big, right? So the first step I was going to suggest was, I've got some vacuform pulls of the Rebel Fleet Trooper, or sorry, the tanker helmet. And I would suggest that, Rob, since you're local, you take that, or you come sometime, and we'll just put a piece of foam in there just for you to kind of like, okay, feeling about right sizing wise. And, if you're like I'm going to just guess like, I bet you I would take that and make it like 94% scale, like just a little, right? And then, but taking into account that the front angle is going to be more tapered, the back angle is going to be, these are just things that I think we have to be really careful of, right? Because I would hate to go through all this effort. Whatever it is, it's going to take like freaking 20 hours to print, this half of the helmet, 20, to print this, 20 hours to print this, 60 hours in, let's just say. And then you're like, it's 5% too big, right?
One of the things I want to mention, but you talked about the mohawk and the ribs. I know she wrote down 9. I think there's 10.
So I was just going off the maquette model.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing too. And I counted 10.
I get 10.
Whatever you want, right? Because
it was one of the first things I noticed with some other ones in there. But
no, 10 works. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do. I would the mohawk ribs as one part, the left side or left or right side is part number 2 and part number 3, and then these things would be number 4 and number 5.
Yeah.
And I would accommodate the return, and these I would do it as like a kind of like if you imagine just like a bit of a hole, but it's only like kind of 1/8 of an inch in.
Yeah.
And then this is a separate greebly altogether. And then what I would do is I would key it with a square inside, so that when you glue it in, these things are pointing at the exact same angle on both sides. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm super anal retentive about that kind of
awesome.
stuff. Like, like, are these lines supposed to be straight up and down, or are they swept back 15 degrees? I'm just like, that's my level of like, I want it to be right.
Yeah.
Because that's what I would do for anything else, right?
It does go in the back of an angle, as you said.
Yeah, at least that's what I see.
Yeah.
The other question I had was the lens.
Yes.
Now it sort of just looks like, well, it's goggles. Is it attached under the helmet, or is it a separate thing? Like, how do you want to do it?
Dan, I always felt it was attached to it. Did you?
I always thought it was attached, but yet we could also get away with it not being attached.
I prefer it was.
I I actually think it looks more like the what do you call it? Not the AT-AT drivers, but you know the AT-AT commanders or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have the green. They actually have like a similar kind of like the World War II Talker helmet with goggles, like full on ski type goggles with the strap on them, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's more on the outside, but part of me thinks, yeah, I think you guys just need to determine. I'm gonna go back in my drawing here.
Well, they kind of look like they don't just by looking at them they don't, because like I've got the goggles for my ATST driver. It's pretty much the same
ATST,
thing.
sorry, yeah.
And on the ATST goggles, they have like the edge around them, like the and this, it just looks like it's straight sunglasses, if that makes
Yeah,
any sense.
the concept drawing has it more like goggles, but
Yeah.
the real life maquette, it just seems like it's attached to like a whole window of black attached to
Yeah.
the helmet itself, and then Greebly's attached to that to the visor
Yeah. It almost looks
Right.
like, you know, those
or the
sunglasses that
goggles.
the kids are wearing these days? You know, like the, what are they called? Like the pit vipers, whatever. It looks
Right.
like it looks
Yeah.
like that, just plain black, which we might be able to even just get away with. You know how you can order the well, Terry might know, but Rob, I don't know. But it's the faceplate, like the lenses that you can get for like the Stormtrooper and all that. How you can
Right.
get it as one solid piece.
Oh, actually, I know what you're talking. Scott was showing Scott Brammer was showing me his green one inside his
Yeah.
TK.
Yeah.
So those are actually face safety shields, like the
Mhm.
ones you would buy from Princess Auto or whatever hardware store. And
Mhm.
then yeah, the original ones were green for stormtroopers, but you can get them in smoke as well too,
Yeah.
right? So that's kind of probably what you want. My thing is the only thing that might be a little persnickety about the visor is like we could engineer it in a way so that there's magnets or it screws into the inside of the helmet or something like that, right?
Mhm.
That'll keep it in that position, and then you might need to play with the thickness of the foam, like whether or not the helmet sits more forward or back on your head. That's just going to be something that you get what I'm saying, right? Like if
Yep.
you put it equal 1 inch all the way around, you'll be like, God damn it, it now digs into my nose. You'll be like, oh, I should have put 1 1/4 of foam here and less here, so that now the whole helmet shifts forward. Comprende?
Would it
Mhm.
be easier just to make it like goggles, just without the rim?
And then how does it stay? Does it attach to the helmet or does it attach to your
I'm
face?
thinking it
Mhm.
attaches underneath the balaclava in some way, like the balaclava.
So you wear it on your face under the balaclava? Is that what you're saying?
Would that
Yeah.
make any sense?
It
I don't know.
would, because then that's just basically ski goggles. Like in order of putting it on, it would be the goggles,
Mhm.
then the balaclava, then the
Right.
helmet.
Mhm.
And then so like in terms of your layering, correct me if I'm wrong, is it like it goes like this, like the balaclava, like it doesn't cover the chin or anything, right?
It
No,
covers the chin. It
yeah. Well,
does.
it kind
Just
of looks like an oversized turtleneck, if anything.
yeah,
If
it
that
does
makes
it.
any
That
sense.
turtle. It's very loose around the neck.
Yeah.
It does go on the chin unrealistically.
Yeah.
Like I don't think a human could actually wear this balaclava properly on the chin like that. I come close to under on when I'm wearing mine, but
So is it like that,
a
or is it
little
like up?
a touch higher.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's that. So, yeah, about
Right,
there. Is
right.
that
Yeah.
So sorry, if the mouth was there, right,
yeah
it's kind of like just under the chin kind of thing,
Mhm.
yeah.
right?
What about the greeblies attached to the goggles itself? I mean, it looks like it's strictly on the goggles. It's not attached to the
Yeah,
helmet
I
at
was
all.
gonna ask that as part of my notes here. Is
Looks like they just protrude out of the side of the helmet.
Yeah, it's the world's
But
worst rear view mirrors.
is it now? It doesn't look like there's any. Oops, sorry, wrong layer. It doesn't look like there's any brim or anything here. It's just literally like the little thingies there, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it looks yeah, it's a rectangular sort of shape. It's not completely rectangular. If anything, probably hexagonal if it got six sides to
Right.
it. But yeah, so that's attached to it. I think those are, and then it's got a slight hook, sorry, arm to it. So there's an
Mhm.
arm attached to the casket that leads towards the eye. So if we
Oh, okay.
zoom in right here,
Right.
that's what it's. So it's a bit like a casket. It's more of a rectangle now that I look at it, but it's
Yeah.
got a slight arm that goes down and to the right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's, and you can see how thin it is, and it kind of goes inside a little bit. There is a lot of space for the goggles, which I think maybe we can wear it as. There's a more of a close up. It looks a little bit different, but you get the idea. This one's a better shot, I think, with Duncan
I
there.
think the way that they have intended it for it to sit on the nose, that to me is more like goggles worn on the face
Okay, cool.
than it being attached to the helmet. So like that's what I would do it like is, and look, there's enough. Sorry, go back an image.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
There's enough with the goggle lens and the greeblies that basically the strap of the goggles wouldn't be seen. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I know
if
what
you
you're
used a
saying.
full-on 1.5 inch elastic around. And then if you look at the angle of the lens too, it's actually tilted forward
Correct.
at the top.
Yeah.
Again, it's probably just Milo's like, sweeping, everything smooth kind of like look, right? So, that could be done in a few different ways. One, it could be done absolutely as a flat piece of tinted smoke, acrylic or whatever, right? Kind of like a stormtrooper thing.
Yeah.
I would actually design it as a goggle frame that you wear on your face, and it has like basically, yeah, like a ski goggle where it has like, that's sort of like, 3/8 of an inch of soft foam around the inside.
Right.
And you go punk, and it sits on your cheeks and your forehead. And let's face it, I'm not Nike here, or I'm not Oakley, right? So it's not going to be perfectly touching every part of your skin here, but it will sit on your face, and then it will align with the helmet. I just think that's going to be more comfortable, because if we made that attached to the helmet, I can just foresee like complaints, like you're just trying to get it aligned and it's not sitting properly, and then like, is it digging into your nose, and then you're like, oh, I don't like it because there's a 1/2 inch gap between the bridge of my nose and the lens, and that's not what the guy looks like. So
yeah, you can control the comfort of the goggles separately from the
totally.
That's a good idea.
So I think having it as a goggle is better than attached to the helmet. That's the way I would do it.
All right, I'm gonna
sold. I'm in on that one.
There's other parts that have greeblies that we might hit you up for later down the road, like right on the chest. There's a piece. There's like even parts of those goggles, and even on the lapel. What's that part called? Is that the lapel?
Yeah.
Like if I'm going to share my screen again.
Yeah, go ahead.
So right here, so we have that
right.
That piece right in the neck. It looks like it's attached to the shirt. That can be easily attached with magnets. That's pretty straightforward. Right here is the name tag, which we kind of figured out because we based it on, if we take a look at the original, this is the original model. It was actually, you can see Gemmel's name on it. It was meant to be a name tag, if anything.
Right.
Now, over time, the action figures have changed it to make looks like some sort of, well, if you take a look, it copies the concept. Yeah, it copies the concept bar, like a badge. Now, that can be replaceable. You can take that off and put the badge to match like the action figure, or take that off and put the name tag, and it'd be Hikmat and Yell Spiel if we goof around with something like doing it in Orbesh, if that's something we want to do. At this point, it's up in the air because we look at the original concept design right down here. You can see what it originally was meant to be, or what he had designed. Now, obviously, that's been altered, and so we're thinking of something like that. How do we alter? We can build
to me, you're kind of diverging a bit here, because if you were trying to get this approved for a Rebel Legion costume, you kind of have to pick one direction and and this is kind of leaning more towards the 501st side of what they dictate, is you have to have 3 separate references of what that is, right?
Right.
So if you were to say, if you were to ask me, like Terry, what do you think we should do?
Mhm.
I think the top of it should look like the maquette as you see it right there. Okay.
Right, exactly.
Right. So it's
I
a flight suit with the padded ribbed shoulders and the puffy shoulder and the stripe down and the red gloves or whatever they are, and then the tunic or whatever, like done that way with the horizontal bar. I wouldn't go with the concept thing because if you go to Rebel Legion with that, they're going to be like, no, you can't just pick and choose what you want.
Gotcha.
Right.
So how do we do the waist down then?
Can you go to can you go to a waist down thing?
There is no waist down.
No, but you've got the concept art.
Of the concept art, this is the waist down.
Right. Is there no? I saw another one
that was an idea. I was just playing some ideas of what we could possibly goof around with. So the top part of this is accurate to the maquette. The bottom, me and Dan were just okay. So he originally wanted patches here. Do we stick with orange, or do we orange boots or black boots?
Right. So here you've got the sort of diagonal tunic closure, right, and the padded shoulders and all that stuff, right?
I added all that in.
Right. That looks like the maquette.
Correct.
My being a Star Wars nerd, like I would probably add a stripe along the side of the pants.
Thought about that.
From waist to ankle, because that's what it would look like on the arms. It also looks like blood stripes on Han Solo's pants. It also looks like Admiral Akbar. He's got the white jumpsuit with the yellow stripe on, right? So we're taking, it's kind of like everybody rebel, everybody good looking like so, right? Whether or not you want the red on the knees, that's a different question. The boots, I personally would just leave them black for now, because most of the pilot, like, again, if I was Nilo and we're digging through the bin at Elstree Studios, what are you going to get? You're going to get the pilot jack boots and all
just
that.
Just get the jack boots. Yeah, totally agree.
We don't have time or budget to make red boots. Again, it's such a fairly obscure character, and I think that there's at least enough inkling of the direction of where this would head in.
I love the idea of the stripes. What do you think, Dan?
I do.
Yeah, it makes more sense.
It does, and it makes it more like in-world realistic. If you know what I mean.
It would be. I think it'd be easier to create other than those stripes up to the knee. I mean, just the sewing part of that looks complicated. And I know we've been talking off the air about having someone connected with someone to help us with this. But I was able to put stripes on my Rees that looked reasonably good. So I think the same can be done here.
To do it right, the stripes should be put on before you sew the pants together, right? So they should be sewn on when the pants, like before you have the inside seam, the inseam sewn. Yeah. So you would sew the front and back, this way. You'd sew it like that, and then you'd sew the outsides, but not the inside. And then that way it's closed here, and you could sew the stripe on properly. Then then you flip it inside out, and then you sew the inseam, right? So that's the proper way to do it, just in terms of order. And remains to be seen. Also, you can make the determination at this point. There's nothing to indicate that it has to be a one piece or a two piece. Right?
I think we figured it's a two piece as it is, just because there's a belt, and it just looks like it would with it coming down to on the side, almost like, what do you call it, an admiral suit or a captain suit,
right?
Almost kimono like it.
Right.
It implies that it's two piece. Because how do you zip that sucker? How do you zip the pants up?
Yeah. So that would be you could do it as a shirt or a jacket with the diagonal, and then it would have like snaps or Velcro there, and and this I would just do it as like a sort of like a rank bar thing, right? And I mean, you could do it as Orabesh or something, right? That might be nice.
I think the original design was meant to be a jumpsuit when he originally drew it. It was supposed to be a jumpsuit, but over time it got, they just were worried about waist up. Let's give it some flair in the collar and stuff.
Sure.
So first of all, thank you, Terry, for giving us your time here. We'll talk off air and how to take the next step throughout all this. And but I'm like, all the ideas that you talked about with the flare and the padding and everything, I'm just I'm more confident about this one, especially with the goggles. I didn't think about that I'm thankful it's actually more goggles than attached to the rim. It makes more sense that way. All right, and the fact we got to discuss this, like going through the steps and planning something this intricate with just a helmet. with just a helmet. I mean, this is what people do when they're building their costume, or especially when it's coming a little more from scratch. A lot of people just say, "Oh, I want a stormtrooper helmet. I'll ask that guy to make it for me, send it in." But the guys who are designing this have to think of all these things.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Oh, yeah.
Terry, where can we find you, or where can people find you?
You can find me. My website's down right now.
Oh no, what happened?
I've been trying to talk to Aaron Lutch about this. He helped me create it a while back, and there's some problem with like whatever it is, Bluehost, blah blah blah, web hosting problems or something. So it's like it's down, unfortunately. But normally it would be panda-props.com. But for now, you can find me on Instagram at Panda Props costumes with an N, and then you can find me on Facebook and YouTube as well.
And the Etsy page, is that the Etsy page as well, or is that what you're
Etsy?
talking
Yeah,
about?
at Panda Props and costumes
Yeah.
on Etsy as well too.
Awesome.
We got links down below all the time, so check out the links. Dan, where can we find you?
Just the usual on Instagram or Facebook, but Instagram it's was it TK92420, I believe, I think, something like that.
Smooth as silk. And as for us here at the Generation X-Wing podcast on YouTube, as well as Outer Rim Rookie on Facebook and Instagram, and all the links down below. And thanks for watching this. Thanks for letting us go through this whole process. This is really eye-opening for me, and a great learning experience. And I always have fun talking to Terry. Terry's so informative. So thanks again, and we will talk to you later. Remember, armor and cloud car pilots are built on hope. Bye. That was Terry's idea, that catchphrase.
I was gonna say, do I get a nickel for every time you say that? I'm the one that coined that.
That you are the one that coined that.
He
Yeah.
owes you a nickel.
That's right. What was that?
Thank you,
J. Jonah Jameson was like, Dr. Octopus, every time someone says I don't want a nickel, right?